there was an American delegation, as you know, I was smuggled in with them, and there was a Canadian delegation. I didn't know the Americans, so I naturally went over and said hi to some of the Canadians, some of whom I know, some of whom I'm on friendly terms with. I met Lucy Zhou, who's with New Tang Dynasty TV. That's a Chinese language TV station in Canada that's very democracy-oriented and freedom-oriented, and we know other people from NTD TV like Joe Wong. So there were ideological friends here. I won't name all of them because I don't want to get them in trouble, but I had a good chat with some friends, but I also saw those Parliamentary Press Gallery executives who had blackballed me, who had written me the letters saying, you're not allowed here, and they were a little surprised to see me. Now, I want to tell you, it's, as you probably know, it's hard to be mean to someone when they're right in front of you. It was easy for them to write us a terse one-line email. You're not allowed here because the Rebel's not a real media, or whatever they said. It's easy to do that from the coldness of a keyboard. But when I was standing in front of them, flesh and bone, I said, what's your beef? Let's just talk it out like men. And maybe they just said it to get through the stress of the moment, but they said yes. So I said, then let's just sit down over coffee, cell phones off the record. What's your beef? Let's get the Rebel here. And simply objecting to our ideology or our philosophy or our style is not sufficient because, I mean, I didn't mention it to them here, but if you look at who's a member of the Parliamentary Press Gallery, you even have, for example, Xinhua. That's a state propaganda channel in China. So how could they possibly be granted official Parliamentary Gallery press status, and we're not? I mean, that is not even journalism when you're a propaganda outlet for China. So I said to them, well, let's talk it out. I want to solve the problem because I don't want to be a perpetual victim of being blacklisted. I want to come to the events that are interesting to me. But let me tell you what happened when I walked over to the other Canadian journalists. I knew some of them knew me. I mentioned a couple of them from the Parliamentary Press Gallery. But we got down to the business of what questions would we ask the minister, and it was a bit of a collective exercise, which I'm naturally not that comfortable with because I think journalism, I mean, I guess you could do it collectively with your competitors, but I don't know. But that's the style of it, and here's why. Because I think there were only 4 questions allowed in total, if memory serves. 2 from the Americans and 2 from the Canadians. So if you have a gaggle of half a dozen Canadians, it makes sense that they sort of talk amongst themselves and say, okay, well, what do we really want to press them on? And given that it was foreign affairs, the theme was, well, what do we do about China? And I agreed. And there were some ideas. The lady from New Tang Dynasty TV gave her suggestion and other suggestions. And I put a suggestion forward. I saw this press release by the United Steelworkers. They're not exactly right-wing people. It's a left-wing labor union. And it was scorching the Liberals for waiving tariffs and duties on an enormous amount of Chinese-made steel. Let me explain what I mean. There's this huge LNG construction project in BC, $42 billion jobs project. It's the largest construction project in Canada. And a Canadian tribunal just ruled that China was illegally dumping Chinese steel in the Canadian market, illegally, unfairly, below cost to drive out Canadian competitors, and this was illegal. And Chrystia Freeland just said, oh, that's okay. That's okay. We'll waive the rules and dump all your cheap steel here. Say what? And so, by the way, a lot of the journalists I spoke to didn't even know this news. How could they not know that? So I actually emailed them the story. I showed them on my phone. And I said, hey, guys, how about we put this question to her because it's fresh and she might not have a pat answer. And I said, you recently waived tariffs and duties on Chinese steel being dumped in Canada. How could you do that, especially given that China still holds 2 Canadian citizens? I said it almost word for word like that. And everyone said, that's a great question. That's a great question. And they all agreed that I had a great question. I felt sort of good about that. And then they said, oh, but Ezra, we don't want you to ask it. And I said, well, no offense, mate, but why? And they said, oh, well, you'll antagonize the minister. I said, no, I'll just say it word for word like I just put it to you. And they said, you came in with Mike Pompeo, so you have to take one of the American 2 questions. You can't say it in the Canadian question. We'll take your question and we'll ask it as one of the 2 Canadians. And I thought, you know what? I'm just glad that there's some proper journalism with a real question being asked, although, to be honest, I think it wasn't asked as sharply as it could have been. But here's Global TV writing the question that I suggested, and and sorta wrote. Here, take a look.
To Minister Freeland, the steelworkers are denouncing the decision to lift tariffs on the illegally dumped steel from China in British Columbia and the LNG projects. I'm wondering if you can talk about why that decision was made in light of the 2 Canadians detained in China.
That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day I do a video monologue and then I interview an interesting guest, and then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.